Hey everybody, we're going to go ahead and create a sphere in oil pastel, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we follow the following criteria for this demonstration. So thing number one, follow along with this video, or if I am demonstrating using the document camera, make sure that you do that. Also, I'm going to share with you guys how to curve your strokes as you shade in your sphere from lightest to darkest. If we shade it in a flat, in just a straight across or flat manner, it will make your sphere look more like a circle, like a shape. So we'll make sure that we shade it in a curved manner. From there, we're going to make sure it has a highlight, a midtone, and a core shadow. So all that means is on your sphere, you're going to have a bright light spot, okay, which is the highlight. The midtones are all of these middle range values, so the slightly darker blues. Your core shadow is your darkest part on the object. So we're going to make sure that your piece has that as well. And also we're going to make sure that it fades gradually from this light area into this dark area, okay, without any lines separating your pressure. So let's go ahead and get started. So right here on my paper, let me get you all set up here. Right here on my paper, I have two circles that I have traced the bottom of a cup that was sitting on my desk. So I would encourage you all to do the same. And I also have a placemat paper that's down underneath my paper. I have the oil pastels I'm going to use today. So I have a color plus white that I'm going to use. I may bring in this darker tone of blue for the core shadow. I'm not really sure yet. And I have my scribble and dump paper, okay? So before I get started, I'm actually going to make sure this little chunk of white that I cleaned it off really well, all of the edges and also the tips of this thing, so that I don't really destroy my sphere as I create it. Remember, if you don't clean this off, the oil pastels do attract any other chunks of oil pastel that's right next to it, and you end up with all of these other colors in the color that you're trying to use if you don't clean it off ahead of time, okay? So take the time to do that. Any oil pastel crumblies will also dump it on this paper, okay? So what I have here is I have two circles that I have drawn just using the bottom of a glass or a cup on my desk. And what I have in this one on the right-hand side is I have what I call training wheels. And all that means is I have my longitude lines like you would see on a globe. And these lines connect the top to the bottom. And what they do is they mimic the curve of the circle, okay? And that starts to help students figure out how much they need to curve their strokes as they shade in their circle to transform it into a sphere, okay? So we're trying to make this look like it's three-dimensional, like it's popping out on the page, like it's a form of a sphere, not like it's a flat circle. So all I did here was I connected my top to my bottom, mimicking the curve of the circle here. Because I'm working on the left side, it curves to the left. Because it's close to the outermost part of this circle, it curves the most. As I go across, connecting top to the bottom, there's less of a curve, okay? Because it's not as close to the outermost curve of the circle. As I go this direction, if I'm on the right hand side, these are going to curve to the right ever so slightly. So again, the one that's on the outside, closest to the outside, is going to be the most curved. As it goes towards the inside, a little bit less curve. So I've already done half of this circle here, okay? Most curve, slightly less curve, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and do this side here. So mimicking the curve, connecting the top to the bottom, okay, most curve, and slightly less curve, okay? And if your lines have to be sketchy like mine, that's more than fine. Do these even lighter than I have here because we are going to fade over them in oil pastel. So I just kind of drew them dark so you could see them. Now, the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I am going to take my oil pastel that I cleaned off, and I am going to use these training wheels to remind myself to curve the strokes, okay? So what I'm going to do is curve them the most toward the outside as I go across the shape, almost straight up and down, As I go to the other side of the shape, I'm going to curve it to the opposite side to create the illusion that the circle is actually the form of a sphere. The other thing I'm going to do is I am going to adjust my pressure. So I am going to press the hardest toward the outside, and gradually as I go up across the sphere, I'm going to let up the pressure toward the middle. And as I go gradually towards this side, I'm going to increase pressure so that the outermost part of the circle is the darkest and the innermost part is the lightest, okay? I think that'll make more sense as we go across, as I demonstrate for you all. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and press as hard as I can toward the outside, curving my strokes. As I go across my circle, I'm letting up the pressure, and I'm also curving my strokes less. As I'm in the center, I'm almost straight up and down. And also the lightest, oh my gosh. And then as I go towards the other side, I'm curving the opposite way and gradually putting more and more pressure on my oil pastel. I'm doing a pretty horrific job of staying inside the lines, but that's okay. We'll kind of try and fix it. Okay, so I have something that looks a little bit like this right now, okay, which is a decent start. All right, so at this point, I have a great start to my sphere. I have something that has curved strokes, so I curved my strokes in the correct way, toward the outside most curved, center least curved, and also I gradually let up the pressure toward the middle and then increased pressure toward the other side, okay? Now at this point in time, I want to go back and check my, my example piece here, okay? You do not have to do blue for yours, it's just the easiest for me. So what I have here is I know right now in mine that it's lightest toward the center. So the highlight here is kind of in the top part. I have a lot of mid-tone here. What that means is I need to add a little bit more pressure to my middle area right in here. And then toward the bottom, I'm going to increase my pressure, okay? And that's going to darken that area there. All right, so I'm going to add those in by adding more pressure gradually in this kind of bottom section of my sphere. Let's see if we can do that. All right. So at this point in time, let me see if I can get this going. So I'm going to do a bunch of light layers. All right, so I want to keep this top part light, and I want to gradually sort of increase my pressure as I go down. I may actually add another layer. Okay, so I'm pressing with lighter medium pressure, and I'm still curving my strokes in the same way as my training wheels underneath suggest. All right, so this is my next layer, so it still goes gradually. So I just deepened this part ever so slightly. As I get down here to the bottom, I'm still curving my strokes in the direction of my training wheels, but I am pressing a little bit harder. Curving it to this side if I'm on this side, curving it to this side if I'm on this side. And as you can see, I'm doing a whole bunch of lighter layers. Deepening this ever so slightly here for the mid-tone, pressing a lot harder here for the core shadow. Okay, so the core shadow is the darkest part that's on the object. I may come back in later and add this darker blue. This may be too dark, not really sure yet. Okay, so see how I pressed harder here. Okay, so this is harder pressure for my core shadow. And again, I'm using this picture as my guide. I don't have an actual sphere in front of me. So core shadow, hardest pressure, mid-tone. I just did layers of medium pressure following the curves of my training wheels. All right, and then I still have this very, very light area up towards the top that is ready for my reflected my highlight. Just my regular highlight here. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is, at this point, I have my my initial sort of base fade shading done, and I'm going to come in with my white highlight, and then I am most likely going to deepen this area. I'm thinking with my darker blue. And for my white highlight here, I'm going to press as hard as I can. And again, I'm still curving my strokes right along with my training wheels that are underneath. I'm going to make the highlight a lot bigger than I need it because I'm going to come back in over top. Ooh, that looks cool. Come back in over top with a little bit more of this color and this color. So I'm adding a layer of my white, and I'm pressing very hard with it. All in this section in here. I'm going to come back in with this and bring my mid-tone back in. And the reason why I pressed so hard with my white is I wanted to make sure that this read as oil pastel and not just crayon, right? Because anytime we leave things kind of scratchy where we can see a lot of the paper underneath, it reads as Crayola crayon. And as you guys know, oil pastels have completely different abilities than crayon. They can actually look like almost oil paint on canvas. That's how intense and vibrant they can look. Okay, so right on top of this, what I'm doing right now is I'm doing what I just did for my mid-tone, okay? And what I'm doing right now is I am putting medium pressure. I'm curving my strokes. If I'm in the center, I'm keeping it straight up and down. If I'm on this side, I'm curving it to the right. And I'm bringing back a little bit more of that mid-tone in the area that matches my reference photo, my reference slide. All right, and so I have this going on. This looks awesome. And the last thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and see if I can blend a little bit of this darker color in for the core shadow. So I'm going to keep this light. And again, I am just following the strokes. I'm keeping it as light as possible so I can blend it with a little bit more of that blue, that lighter blue. Following the strokes of my training wheels underneath. And I'm bringing this mostly towards the outside and the bottom. I wish this didn't look quite so scratchy, but I'm going to do a layer of this blue. Sorry, y'all. A little bit of this blue on top to blend it back in. So I'm adding a little bit more blue on top of that core shadow I just did, just to make it look a little bit less scratchy and to really blend it with the mid-tone, which I think it's actually doing. Now, last but not least, I'm going to add a little bit of reflective highlight. Okay, so this is basically the highlight that's closest to the surface that the object is sitting on. So anytime an object's sitting on a surface, a lot of times there's a little bit of a light that's cast back on the object. So if this were sitting on the table here, our reflective highlight would be right here toward the underside. So, and it's on the object itself. So I'm going to add a little bit of that back in. I'm using like the smallest crumb of this ever. This is annoying. Oh, cool. All right, y'all, this is as good as I can do right now. So this is what I have for my sphere. I kept my colors blue just so that I could more easily match what the reference photo was. So give that a shot. The key is to make sure that your strokes are curved, that you're doing layers of your oil pastel color, you're watching your pressure, watching your direction, and that you're really thinking about looking at your reference photo, right? With locating where the highlight, the midtones, the core shadow, darkest part of the object, all of that is within your piece.